5, 4, 3, 2.
Good evening. I'm Abby Harris of Boardman High School TV, along with my co-host, attorney Mark Huberman. And we are very excited to bring you another installment of Boardman Biography, a BSDM program devoted to profiling educators and community leaders who have made significant contributions to the Boardman schools and/or the Boardman community.
In selecting today's guest, we have an incredibly talented Boardman graduate who, in my view, personifies everything that is best about the arts in Boardman. Speaking of none other than the pride of the class of 1975, is that right? Rick Blackson. Rick, welcome to Boardman Biography.
Mark. Thank you. I don't know if Fred Davis might have an issue with that.
He wasn't exactly in the arts. He was more in the athletics.
That's right.
There you go.
Before getting into your professional career, tell us about your background. Did you grow up in Boardman?
No, I grew up in western Pennsylvania, a little town called Mercer, about 45 miles from here. And my dad was an auctioneer. My mom helped him out in his furniture business and his bowling alley and his auction business. And my dad was a bit of a ham, so I think that that's probably where I noticed that I got a little bit of that performance bug, probably from my dad. He always enjoyed having the microphone and was very comfortable in front of his auction crowds, got them laughing and drew them in and everything, and always had a real likable personality. And so I think that probably was an influence for me, just kind of growing up around that.
Do your parents still live in Boardman on Stadium Drive?
They do. After they had moved to Boardman in the 1970s, they've been here ever since. And I'm really very blessed that they're both healthy and well and on Stadium Drive. Probably going to be watching this at some point. Hi, Mom and Dad.
Do you have any brothers and sisters?
I do. 2 older sisters. They're both married, live in Pennsylvania. And I have my younger brother, Gary, lives in New Springfield, Ohio, all the way over in the country there with his wife and his son Jeremy, his daughters Marissa and Jocelyn are grown up now.
I understand you moved to Boardman in the 8th grade. Did you attend Glenwood or Center?
I was at Center Middle School for 1 year and saw that big auditorium. In fact, 8th grade orientation was in the old Boardman Center Middle School auditorium. I remember how wide and expansive it seemed to me at the time, and I never knew that years later I'd be on that stage quite a bit.
So your dad was an auctioneer, so he was behind the mic. And any music in your family?
That's the thing. Not really. Like my mother's side of the family, I'd heard that there were people that were very gifted musicians, and some of her uncles and whatnot played some instruments. But in the immediate family, no. We didn't even listen to the radio that much growing up. Just a handful of records, and that's about it. But when I was a little boy, about age 4, my dad's furniture store had a little chord organ for sale. And I used to go like any little kid would and play around with it. Well, the lady that worked for my dad happened to know how to play keyboards. She saw that I was interested. I knew my numbers, I knew my letters. She showed me how to do it. I seemed to have aptitude for it. By the age of 6, one of my dad's furniture customers happened to own a little piano store. So they bartered a Spinet Wurlitzer piano for some furniture, and I started taking lessons when I was 6 years old.
And the rest, they say,
is an unusual history, because by the time I was 12, I didn't want to do lessons anymore. I quit piano. I didn't want anything to do with it. But I kept playing. And some of the kids at my church at that time started saying, "Hey, Rick, you can play this." And there was a girls' trio at my church that needed a piano player. I was 13 or 14 years old. If I could be their accompanist, I could hang out with those girls. So that was pretty good motivation.
That's a good motivation.
And I got back into it again and just started to play a lot more and began developing my own style.
So are you one of these guys, can you play by ear?
Mine is more of a combination of some playing by ear, but it's mostly, I'm more of a sight person, but I can extrapolate from what I'm seeing and play by ear.
A lot of us have music teacher. You're a music teacher to a lot of people around here. We'll talk about that later. Who was your music teacher?
A guy named Claire Williman. He was the gentleman that bought furniture from my dad, sold him the piano, and he was in Hermitage, Pennsylvania in the Sharon, that whole Hickory was called back in those days. And he was quite a well-known piano and organ salesman, and also a very, very good keyboard player in his own right, and did a lot of entertaining in that area.
How many years did you take from him?
About maybe 3 to 4 with him, and then a couple of his assistants later. And then when I came over here to Boardman, I remember a lady named Vivian Keener, just briefly. That was about the end of my keyboard training.
So when you hit Center Middle School, were you involved in the chorus or the band? And who was your teacher back when? Or did you not get involved?
Not yet. Not at Center Middle School. I didn't do the music thing there then. But that wasn't until I came over here to the high school.
Big time as you hit Boardman High School. And you were in this Boardman High School, right?
Absolutely, yeah. This was a very new school then, and it was state of the art, and I just thought that it was the best place. I thought Boardman was the best place, the center of the world. We had this amazing Southern Park Mall that nothing could be bigger and finer than that. We had this amazing brand new high school, nothing could be bigger and better than that. Had elevators and everything, and I needed them because I was in a cast when I came in here as a freshman.
For what?
I got ran over by a wheelchair, Mark. I was at the Canfield Fairgrounds. A guy ran into me. The pedal sliced my Achilles tendon. I had to have 2-hour surgery. Was in a cast. So here I am bounding down the hallways of Boardman High School and on crutches my first year. But what happened was I wasn't involved in the music program directly, but after a period of time, my mom was real instrumental, and thankfully she was. She went over and visited with Mrs. Humphrey. And this is the part I think will be interesting to a lot of the older people watching.
The choir teacher here at the high school, the choral teacher for...
A legend.
A legend.
Ethelita Humphrey, whenever I came here in 1970, 71, around that time, had been here for decades then. And she was quite a mentor to me. I really learned a lot from her. But what ended up happening was my mom talked to her and said, my son plays the piano. Do you have any openings? And so what ended up happening was she said, yeah, have him come over and audition. I went over and played for her and could sight read a little bit. And she invited me to be the teen chorus director. And so that was my first experience.
So did you become one of the accompanists?
I became one of the accompanists, and that's where I met a very young teacher, had long, stylishly cut hair for the 1970s. He was so youthful that many of the parents thought he was one of the students, and his name was Errol Kerberg. And that was, I believe, his first year here at Boardman High School. And he ended up becoming one of my very influential mentors as well.
And he succeeded Ethelita Humphrey.
And he, of course, succeeded Ethelita Humphrey and took the reins of all the programs here. But that experience with her was phenomenal because you have to understand, Mrs. Humphrey had a lot of experience with some of the great choral music groups that were around this country back in the 40s and 50s, like Fred Waring and the Pennsylvanians. She had a lot of experience. And so when I began working with her, she really coached me and spent a lot of one-on-one time teaching me the finer points of following a conductor and responding to singers. And
I can still see her directing.
Oh, yeah, I can too.
It's in your genes.
And she really worked with me, and I'm very, very thankful that she did, because it helped me to become and develop a little bit of an appetite for finer music as well, because like I said, culturally I had very little exposure to music.
Bill Dykins. Tell us about your experience and how you became involved with Bill Dykins.
Well, first of all, I think that almost anyone who had an experience with the legendary Mr. Dykins would have to say, whether they had him as a teacher or if they had him as a director, he leaves an indelible impression. And my first working with him was that he or somebody from the theater department asked Mrs. Humphrey if there was anybody that could become a rehearsal accompanist for Kismet. And that would have been my junior year, in the year of 1973-74. And so I did become the rehearsal accompanist for Kismet. At that time, I knew so little about Broadway musicals, I didn't even know what they were. I thought I'd heard of Hello Dolly. I thought it was a song. I didn't know it was a show. I didn't know what a show was. So here I go to these rehearsals for Kismet, and here's this guy, this ball of energy with this amazing ability to communicate to kids and to get them to do things that they would never ordinarily do. And he talked about acting from the gut. He talked about comic timing and how if you wait just that split second to say a line, it could be the difference between a chuckle and a laugh.
And projecting.
And projecting. Oh, absolutely. We were in the old Cow Palace there, Boardman Center Middle School auditorium. The place was really wide and spread out. And he would just, like we were talking earlier, if he couldn't hear you, he'd be back in his place back there at the back of and he'd start to babble these words out and just kind of mock you and imitate you, and that was your signal that, hey, we're not getting in the back here. And he taught us to not kill the lines, and so a lot of kids.
Did you get in a show yourself?
I was so fascinated watching Kismet that I remember him working with Carl Campbell, whose dad was a long-time custodian here, wonderful man. Carl Campbell had the character role, the funny guy, and I thought, I could do that. I really think I could do that. So I auditioned for Hello, Dolly, of all things, that spring, and did land the role of Horace Vandergelder for my senior year, which would have been the year of '74 and '75. And of course, the wonderful Jessica Houston was a standout performer. She had lead roles as a sophomore in Kismet, as Dolly in Hello, Dolly, and then her third year, her senior year, she was, after I had graduated, she was Mame. In Mame, she was a wonderful performer. Terrific experience. Doing that, I think, I learned more about performing from Bill Dykins than I did anyone, and was the most influenced by him.
Didn't we all?
Yeah.
Did you attend YSU right after high school?
Yes, I did. I was only 17. Didn't really know what I was doing. I went down. I tried to be a music major, but I'd had no formal, music training in that type of music. So it just didn't really work out for me. I ended up trying some different majors. But I did accrue a lot of music credits down there and ended up transferring. But it was around that time that Mr. Dykins called me back to Boardman High School to music direct a couple of shows here. And I did the Fantastics with one of my best friends to this day, Todd Harmon, and a young man by the name of Tim Welsh, whose son, I believe, has been very active around
One of
here.
the best performers is Tim Jr. Not that Timmy wasn't bad, but his son, one of the best ever been on this stage.
Well, Todd and Tim played their fathers in the Fantastics, if anyone's familiar with that show. And You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown might have preceded the Fantastics. And Charlie Brown was played by Mahoning County Clerk of Courts, Tony Vivo, also known as Champ Summers.
There you go.
One of my best friends, too, back in the day there.
So something called the Rich Morrow Review.
Rich Morrow was a Boardman graduate, a very fine drummer, another baseball player. We all played baseball together. And Rich and I started a band, and we played in lounges all around the area, and some out of town. And eventually, we found out that Don Abraham might be interested. Now, Don had been part of a very popular gospel group, the Abraham Brothers, in the early '70s. Boardman High School graduate, wonderful singer and performer, became the lead singer in the Rich Morrow Band, and Don happened to be a terrific Elvis impersonator, too, by the way. I don't know if you want to know about that story, but there was an assembly that the Rich Morrow Band did here called A Tribute to Elvis. And Don Abraham played Elvis, like I said. He did it wonderfully. And Don was quite the ladies' man. And I will never forget, that assembly was absolutely packed. And a lot of the teachers came in because they were all Elvis fans back in those days. And the kids, a lot of them didn't really know much. Elvis had passed away, and there had been a big furor about that. But we did this Elvis show, and we had big orchestration kind of a thing that we had put together with early keyboard synthesizers. And I had my friend Todd Harmon, Pam Porter, Gretzinger now, Kathy Freeberg had been a Boardman High School chorale member, and we had the backup singers, the whole deal. And we did this show, and the girls, because Don was quite the ladies' man, they went crazy. So it felt like a real Elvis concert, because every move that Don did, those girls were just eating
Where
it
is he
up.
today?
And they were screaming, they were going
Where's
crazy.
Don today?
Don has been a very successful cruise ship entertainer. He's been a headliner on cruise ships. And over the course of his life, he's really embraced his gospel music roots and heritage again. And he's been promoting some gospel concerts, some pretty high-profile things around the area here for the last couple of years.
I saw in some background information that you went to some place called Anderson University. What's
Anderson
that?
University.
Where is that?
Anderson is in Anderson, Indiana, 35 miles northeast of Indianapolis, and it was a Christian liberal arts school. Very, very good academics, about 2,000 to 3,000 students. It was probably something like Westminster College. And they had really fine music and other, the full liberal arts curriculum. And I had a great education there, was involved in a lot of their
Did you
musical...
get your degree from there?
Yeah, I got a religion degree from there, because for a while I kind of thought about the possibility of getting into ministry work full time. That never panned out because all the music and performance things kept overtaking me. And the school had excellent opportunities to perform and to be involved in those kind of things. So I ended up traveling and touring with groups there from the university. Even after I graduated from there, I did that. And I was a music director for several of their touring groups and traveled the country extensively for 4 years with
Wow.
a couple of music groups, produced a couple albums.
And your 68 years old now for all this travel?
Yeah, something like that, huh?
You are perhaps best known for your long association with Mary Jo Maluso. How did that come about?
Yeah, Mary Jo is my best friend and my wonderful wife, and we met in 1990. At that time, I was working with Easy Street Productions as their music director. We can talk about that if we have time later. But Mary Jo was someone I had known because everybody around here knew Mary Jo. She had hosted Good Morning Youngstown. She had been the host of a show called POW, 33 POW, which a lot of kids watched back in the day, a game show. And she was an equity actress, had played Guinevere at Carousel Dinner Theater, had studied in New York with legendary
She did Maria
vocal
in West
coach.
Side Story at the
She
Playhouse.
did Maria in West Side Story at the Playhouse and numerous other roles at the Playhouse. So, but I'd never met her. And her mom who was the Federal Plaza director at the time, came across an old song that needed to be recorded, asked Mary Jo to do it. At that time, she begrudgingly accepted. They took it to me because they knew that this Easy Street had a music director, and at that time we were at the Uptown Theater, and we worked on that song together. That's how Mary Jo and I met. But at that time, neither one of us were in a position in our lives to take it any further than that. So later on, when I met her, we both were able to get together and to meet one another and to talk and to visit, and then it just took one time for me.
So how many years have you been a cabaret act?
We started doing that almost from the onset. We started to perform together, and that's when she brought in her old mentor, Bob Vargo, who in my adult life has been my most influential mentor. Bob Vargo had the theater arts program at Wilson High School forever, and is now
speech teacher
retired.
and
Right, exactly, and
then the Playhouse
and everything
else.
Yeah, and of course, in his own right, he's a consultant to the theatrical business
and a gifted actor.
Gifted. Oh my goodness, yeah, the
Gifted.
guy has an amazing pedigree. Yeah. And Bob helped us out. He took us under his wing, and he told us what cabaret was, taught us all the
So
ropes.
how often do you guys perform?
We perform in the good years when everything is really going well, when we're aggressively seeking it. We will perform anywhere between maybe a couple dozen to maybe 50 some performances a year. So it's not grueling, but it's very active. And then in years when we're not pursuing it as much, which has been the last several years, then we pare it down quite a bit.
Do you do weddings? Do you do?
Occasionally, we'll do like we'll do like a wedding reception or something, and every once in a while, people will even hire us to do the songs for the ceremony.
But the biggest thing, I suppose, the bread and butter is you teach, right?
Right, exactly.
What do you teach?
I have piano and vocal students, and I'm very, very, very blessed again because it's grown to over 60 students a week, so it's a very, very busy schedule. And I've had some Boardman students, of course, Poland, Canfield, New Springfield, Columbiana, Salem, and I go to people's homes, and that's the niche that I found really.
And the last thing is you're very involved in your church?
Yeah, well, not as much now. For about 30 out of the 33 years that I was around here, I was the music leader for Simon Road Church of God.
Right around the corner.
Yeah, exactly. And then in recent years, then I needed that time to do some other things, so I haven't been as active there. But yeah, that was a big part of my life, and that was another way I cultivated a lot of the piano skills doing that.
Well, Mr. Blackson, we're at the end of this edition of Boardman Biography, but I want to take this opportunity to thank you for being with us and for your great service to the community.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you, and thank you for letting me talk your ears off today. I hope it was somewhat interesting for whomever might be watching today.
Rick, you are, as I said at the outset, you're a great Boardman success story.
Thank you.
If anybody personified what the arts produce in Boardman, I think you, your old buddy Todd, and a few others are it. It was a pleasure to finally have you back at Boardman High School and back in our studio here. And I say we go back a long way.
Glad to be with you.
My daughter Lisa was one of your students. You talk about talking your ear off.
Well,
my daughter could talk your ear off.
Lisa, as a 12-year-old, was the most literate, most amazingly gifted, culturally informed child I've ever met. She was amazing.
Well, you were a real inspiration to her, just like you're an inspiration to a lot of folks. Rick,
thanks
for being with us.
Abby, thanks.
Thanks.
Hey, it's great to be with you.
Me too. We hope you have once again enjoyed this edition of Boardman Biography. If you have suggestions to other individuals you would like to see profiled on this program, please pass them along and we will do our best to get it scheduled. Until then, we hope you will continue to support the Boardman Schools Television Network.